Blackbeard was one of the most feared pirates of the seven seas. He was said to embody the devil himself, impossibly tall, with a wild black beard and hair tied up with lit fuses. His eyes were said to glow like embers, and even the fiercest of men shook in fear at the sight of his flag. Blackbeard, or Edward Teach, his real name, is one of the most notorious pirates from history. His reputation is that of a very scary and dangerous man. But did you know that despite having such a scary reputation, there's no evidence that Blackbeard ever actually killed anyone? Let's fix that. Hello, I'm Shay LaFontaine, and this is History Fix Kids, where I tell surprising true stories from history you won't be able to stop thinking about. Today's episode is all about Blackbeard the pirate. Blackbeard is a fairly misunderstood historical figure. There just aren't a lot of surviving records about him, and most that we do have came from his enemies, the people who survived his attacks. According to those reports, Blackbeard was a very scary bad guy. But in none of the reports, none of them, does Blackbeard ever kill anyone. And when you think of pirates, they were pretty violent guys. You'd kind of expect that of Blackbeard, but no. So how did he do it? How can you be such a successful pirate and also let everyone live? Let's dig into Blackbeard's story and find out. Blackbeard's real name was Edward Teach, and he was born in Bristol, England around 1680. Blackbeard probably had some kind of schooling because we know that he could read and write. Not everyone could read and write in those days. He also had some knowledge of math. When Blackbeard was a young man, England was in a war with France for control of North America. There was also a war going on with Spain at the same time, so lots of war. One thing England used to do during times of war was hire privateers. So a privateer is like a legal pirate. It's a pirate that was hired by the crown to attack and steal from enemy ships. Blackbeard became a privateer for the Queen of England, whose name was Queen Anne. But all wars come to an end, right? When the war ended, Queen Anne didn't need privateers anymore. She basically told Blackbeard, "Thanks for your help. You can go now." But Blackbeard really liked being a privateer. It was fun and adventurous, and he was really good at it. He wanted to keep doing it. A privateer who doesn't work for the government is called a pirate. And piracy was not legal like privateering was. But Blackbeard really wanted to keep doing his thing, so he decided to become a pirate. To become a pirate, Blackbeard needed a ship and a crew. He headed for an island called Nassau in the Bahamas. Nassau was like the pirate capital. It was in the Caribbean, which was a major center for trade at the time. Ships were lugging around valuable trade goods like sugar, cotton, and tobacco that pirates could easily get their hands on. We often think of pirate treasure as a chest full of gold coins and precious gems and whatnot, but really most of the treasure they were stealing was actually these trade goods. Sugar was so valuable back in those days, it was called white gold. So Blackbeard made it to Nassau around 1716. Once he got there, he met a successful pirate named Captain Benjamin Hornigold. Not wanting to start from scratch on his own, Blackbeard joined Hornigold's crew. But Hornigold is not a very good leader. He's not very good at keeping the crew happy. Blackbeard knows a happy crew is super important. He prioritizes the happiness of the crew, and he starts to rise through the ranks. A lot of the men are more loyal to Blackbeard than they are to Hornigold, their captain. Blackbeard was really a natural-born leader. By the summer of 1717, Blackbeard realizes that he doesn't need to be part of Hornigold's crew anymore. He has all these men loyal to him. He can be the leader of his own pirate crew. He just needs a ship. He goes back to Nassau, the pirate capital of the Caribbean, and he's walking around the docks there, and he happens upon a ship. It's in bad shape. It's this really beat up ship waiting to be repaired. He's curious about this ship, so he goes up to it, and there's a man on board named Stede Bonnet. Stede is a very interesting character. Stede was not a pirate. In fact, he was a very wealthy gentleman. His father owned a sugar plantation in the Barbados that he was set to inherit. But Stede didn't really want to be a sugar plantation owner. He wanted to be a pirate. So he had bought a ship to become a pirate, but he had no idea what he was doing, and so he had wrecked his ship. And now here he was in Nassau, waiting for his ship to be repaired. Blackbeard was a pirate in need of a ship, and Stede Bonnet was a ship owner in need of a pirate to sail it. It was perfect. So the two teamed up. Blackbeard and his crew and Stede Bonnet set off as soon as the ship was repaired. Stede isn't doing a whole lot of pirating at first. He's mostly just reading books in his cabin, but he's part of it, and that's all he really wanted, was to be part of piratey things, so it works. Blackbeard does things a little differently than the other pirates. Instead of attacking all these small islands and ships around the Caribbean, he heads for the east coast of what is now the United States. Now, this is 1717. So back in those days, there was no United States of America yet. That wouldn't happen until the Declaration of Independence was signed in 1776. In 1717, it was still the 13 British colonies. Blackbeard decided to take his piracy to the 13 colonies, not all the little islands. This is important because unlike the little islands, the 13 colonies were much larger and they were centers for communication. They had newspapers. News of Blackbeard's fearsome attacks started to travel all up and down the East Coast in these newspapers, and his reputation grew and grew. So here is what he did. When he found a ship that he wanted to rob, he would hoist his flag. Blackbeard's flag showed a demon skeleton stabbing a heart with a spear. He didn't use the classic skull and crossbones that all the other pirates were using. He needed his own unique flag because he needed people to recognize him. Next, he would board the ship, just looking really scary pretty much. He was this big guy, over 6 feet tall, which was very tall for the 1700s, and he had this wild black hair. According to reports, he would light fuses in his beard that would spark and smoke. Here's the thing, though. He didn't have to kill or even hurt anyone on the ships he was robbing. He just looked so scary that they gave him anything he wanted. They immediately surrendered. This was all part of Blackbeard's plan. He used intimidation to scare people into giving him the loot. He wanted to be in the newspapers. He wanted people to know about him, to be afraid of him. That way, when he hoisted his recognizable flag, they would surrender without a fight. This plan worked beautifully. Eventually, Blackbeard had something like 250 men in his crew and as many as 5 different ships that formed his pirate fleet. In November of 1717, Blackbeard wins what might be his biggest victory as a pirate. He steals a French ship called La Concorde. La Concorde was a slave ship. It was carrying 450 enslaved people from Africa to the American colonies. Because of this, it was very heavy and very slow. Blackbeard easily caught up to the ship, and as soon as he hoisted his flag, the captain surrendered. It turned out that many aboard La Concorde were really sick, and at the time Blackbeard approached, only around 23 men were well enough to defend the ship. So they just gave up right away. Blackbeard actually gave the captain of La Concorde a smaller ship and let him go, along with most of the enslaved Africans. Although some enslaved people decided to join Blackbeard's crew. You see, pirates didn't view enslaved Black people any differently than white English people. So for enslaved Africans, joining a pirate crew was one way to get their freedom. Blackbeard captures La Concorde, this giant, very impressive ship, and he renames it Queen Anne's Revenge. It becomes his flagship. Just after this, in December of 1717, Blackbeard finds out that King George, who's the current king of Great Britain, had signed a proclamation to end piracy. The pirates are causing too many problems, and King George wants them to stop. So here's the deal. He says that they all have until January 5th to stop being pirates. They can keep any of the loot that they've stolen up until January 5th, but then they have to stop. They have to surrender and they will be pardoned, which means that they won't get in trouble. So Blackbeard sees this as a good opportunity. He's like, okay, so anything I steal between now and January 5th, I get to keep, and then I can surrender, get a pardon, and live in peace with all my loot. I won't get in trouble. Sounds pretty good. He starts looking for one final score to retire on. What can he steal before the time runs out? Blackbeard heads to Charleston, South Carolina, and uses his ships to set up a blockade. A blockade stops other ships from coming in and out of a port. He captures a passenger ship called the Crowley, which has a lot of important people on board, and he holds them hostage. He sends a message to Robert Johnson, the governor of South Carolina. He basically says, I've kidnapped all these important people, and I'm going to kill them if you don't give me what I want. Now, this obviously is not nice or right, but Blackbeard was a pirate after all. Pirates were bad guys. These were the sorts of things pirates did. Now, Blackbeard could have asked Governor Johnson for anything, silver, gold, whatever. Do you want to know what he asked him for? A chest of medicine. You see, a lot of his crew was sick, and he needed the medicine to help them get better. Blackbeard was a natural-born leader after all. He was a bad guy, but he was a good leader. Governor Johnson sends him the chest of medicine, and he lets all the hostages go. He doesn't hurt anyone. He doesn't kill anyone. He sticks to his word, and he lets them go home. After this, Blackbeard realizes that he may have gone too far. Kidnapping important people and sending the governor a list of demands may have been a bit much. Also, he has this big fleet of ships and all these men now. It's not exactly easy to sneak around anymore. He realizes that he needs to downsize. He needs to get rid of some of these ships and a lot of these men. He's way too noticeable like this. So Blackbeard comes up with a plan. As they sail near Beaufort Inlet in North Carolina, Blackbeard orders the crew aboard his ship, the Queen Anne's Revenge, to run it aground on purpose. So they drive it into the shallow water where it hits the bottom and sinks. Yes, Blackbeard sank his own ship. This was all part of the plan. Next, he sends Stede Bonnet ashore to ask for a pardon from the North Carolina governor, Charles Eden. But while Stede is gone, Blackbeard steals his ship and leaves most of the men marooned on an island. He takes Stede's ship and about 40 or 50 of the men, and he heads out. He leaves the rest of them behind. That's how he managed to downsize his crew so that he wouldn't be as noticeable. Blackbeard still really wants that pardon, though, so he goes to the governor of North Carolina, Governor Eden. And Governor Eden says he will pardon Blackbeard of all the piracy. He won't get in trouble as long as he promises to settle down with his men and stop being pirates. The men agree. They settle down in Bath, North Carolina. But they don't really stop being pirates. Every once in a while, they would go out to sea and come back with mysterious treasure that they would sell to the governor. They'd be like, we just found all this sugar and cocoa on an abandoned ship, so we took it. Do you want to buy it from us for cheap? And the governor would buy it. Now, did Governor Eden know that Blackbeard and his men were stealing this stuff? Yeah, he probably did. But it was good for the colony. They were bringing wealth into the colony, and so the governor just sort of turned a blind eye and let it happen. It's almost like they were unofficially privateers, legal pirates, except that it wasn't actually legal at all. The governor was just letting it happen anyway. You know who isn't happy, though? The governor of the Virginia colony to the north. Alexander Spotswood is the governor of Virginia, and he is not happy. Blackbeard is still robbing ships, and this is messing up the trade coming into the Virginia colony. He's stealing their trade goods. Governor Spotswood can't really do anything about it because Blackbeard lives in North Carolina. He's protected by the governor of North Carolina, and Spotswood is the governor of Virginia, a whole different colony. But he comes up with a plan. He goes to a couple of Royal Navy ships that are hanging out protecting the Virginia colony and asks them for help. One of the Navy guys, a guy named Lieutenant Robert Maynard, agrees to help him take down Blackbeard. Now, they aren't allowed to do this, remember, but they do it anyway. Maynard takes a couple of ships, the Ranger and the Jane, and he heads down towards North Carolina. He knows that Blackbeard likes to hang out in the shallow water around Ocracoke Island on North Carolina's Outer Banks, so he goes to look for him there. Sure enough, Blackbeard and his men are hiding out at their favorite place, Ocracoke. Usually they're pretty safe there. The water is really shallow and dangerous, and there are lots of great places to hide, but Maynard has a plan. You see, the Ranger and the Jane are not Navy ships. They're merchant ships, the kind of ships Blackbeard likes to rob. Also, he's secretly hidden a bunch of armed men below decks. So he's trying to trick Blackbeard. He's trying to lure him like bait to these merchant ships and then surprise attack. And that's exactly what he does. One of Blackbeard's men sees the ships arriving, and they immediately go to attack them. They shoot the ship called the Ranger. Next, Blackbeard boards the other ship, the Jane, which is exactly what Maynard wanted him to do. All of a sudden, all the men who are hiding jump out with their guns and their swords, and a huge battle starts. Maynard and Blackbeard rush at each other with swords, and they're in this epic sword fight battle. A naval sailor shoots Blackbeard with a gun, but he just keeps fighting. He's injured over and over, but he's still fighting like a madman until he finally goes down. The infamous pirate Blackbeard is killed, and his crew surrenders on November 22nd, 1718. After this, Lieutenant Maynard goes through all of Blackbeard's stuff, and he finds a bunch of stolen stuff, a bunch of loot in official North Carolina cargo holds. He realizes that Governor Eden was in on it, and this turns into a huge scandal. Governor Eden is being accused of letting Blackbeard get away with being a pirate. Governor Spotswood of Virginia is accused of attacking Blackbeard outside of his jurisdiction. He wasn't supposed to attack or arrest anyone who wasn't in his colony, but he did anyway, or he had Maynard do it anyway. There's this huge political scandal after Blackbeard's death that only made him more well-known and infamous. Now, believe it or not, Blackbeard was only a pirate for around 2 years. That's not very long at all. So what made him so famous? Well, his fearsome reputation and the political scandal after his death helped. But what really made Blackbeard famous was a book that came out around 6 years after his death called A General History of Pirates. This book talked about all the different pirates during Blackbeard's time, which was called the Golden Age of Piracy. We're not exactly sure who wrote the book, but whoever it was, they were a big fan of pirates. The author made Blackbeard out to be a hero in this book, and it's a big part of the reason he's still so famous and so admired by people today, even though he was really quite scary and mean. When you think about it, though, pirates weren't really heroes, were they? Pirates were actually really bad guys. They were criminals. They hurt people and they stole things that weren't theirs. Sometimes we confuse pirates with other fantasy characters like mermaids and unicorns. Sometimes it's hard to tell which characters were real and which were made up. Pirates aren't imaginary. They were real people. There really were pirates like Blackbeard who sailed the seven seas, terrifying and attacking other ships. Well, it seems, surprisingly, that Blackbeard mostly let his victims go, he didn't hurt them, we still need to remember that he was a pirate, not a hero. Thank you all so very much for listening to History Fix Kids. I hope you found this story interesting and maybe you even learned something new. Grown-ups, remember, you can access those lesson materials at the link in the description. Be sure to subscribe and help me spread the word by telling a few friends about the show. That'll make it much easier to get your next fix.